Hey, it's Drybear. The day has finally come. We have our invasion nerf hotfix for the First Descendant, so let's go through the notes. Now, the purpose of this hotfix primarily was to target the grievances that people had around the new invasion mechanics. So most of this is going to be around reworking those mechanics here, but I think there's also a mixed response on how they're adjusting these mechanics, whether or not they needed to be adjusted in the first place, and also whether the new result is better or worse than it was before. So let me know what you think down below. The first change is going to be around the pillar mechanic, and this is something that I really truly hope that they learn their lesson on. This is something just around accessibility and readability for certain things, making sure that symbols are distinct enough from each other so they can easily be discerned. This is something that happens a lot, especially the more artistic and stylistic you get with icons like these, the more they run together because they don't have distinguishing features that make them easy to tell apart, but they are doing some accessibility changes to make this easier as well. So not only are they reducing the number of symbols from 6 down to 4, before we had more symbols, now we're going to have exactly 4. So you're only going to have to remember the X, the triangle, the circle, and the square. And no, not all of these fit into the square hole. So we have all of these lined up here. It's only going to be 4. And they also got rid of the duplicate pillars as well, which means that every single time you destroy a tumor in this mechanic, it will always show a symbol underneath at one of these positions. So they're changing the symbols so they're easier to read. They're making it so the duplicate pillars that have no symbol on them are completely gone. This is footage from before the patch, by the way. So they're making it a lot easier to read, and then the symbols are simplified as well. So now, no matter what pillar you go to, no matter where you go in the game, you will be able to see a result on the pillar. The pillars will be easier to locate. The tumors won't be respawning at all, so once they get destroyed, they're good to go. The door that takes damage that you need to burn through has lost 3 total hits, which means you can do it in a single cycle if you don't miss. It was 3 times 3 tumors, 3 hits for 3 tumors for 9 total. Now it's 2 hits for 3 tumors for 6 total, and the gun that they give you has ammo of 6. I mean, some of these changes by themselves are going to be more than enough to make this more enjoyable and easier to clear for a lot of people. So like just the tumors not regenerating is big, having no false tumors is big, and also being able to destroy the tumors faster. They now require 3 hits instead of 5, which means you don't necessarily need an AoE Descendant to clear them out. You can do them with a weapon if it's fast enough, or even a shotgun or a launcher if you really wanted to. They also adjusted the move path and the move speed of the drones. Some of them kind of patrol quite a while, and I also sometimes when they turn around, they do like an instantaneous 180 turn, which is really weird and disorienting. So they adjusted the move path and reduced the movement speed. There are no tumors for today's invasions after the hotfix, so we'll hopefully be able to see the result of these changes tomorrow. Today was the puzzles and the brains, not necessarily the tumors on this. And they also kind of wisened up to how silly it was to make the stoplight pattern on the pillars vertical, but the stoplight pattern on that you're supposed to be matching on the drones horizontal, which at first, when I first started doing invasions, that tripped me up a lot. It made me think that those two weren't related at all because they were displayed in completely different orientations. And also you kind of have to guess on which, like, is one at the top and one is at the left. But what if you're, if you're someone who writes right to left in a different language, maybe you thought the far right was the first slot. It's just really weird. I feel like there's just a lot of usability and clarity that they could have done better with the launch, but they've cleaned some of this up with that. They also increased the range and firing rate of the special weapon, and again, you only need 2 hits per tumor instead of 1, which makes it a lot cleaner. They did fix an issue where some Descendants, while holding the special weapon, could AoE clear the entire door, like Valby or Enzo. Certain abilities they had would deal damage to the door while you had the weapon in hand. They fixed that, but they lowered the amount of hits required with the weapon, so again, you only have to 1-cycle this, and if they don't change the timer required, it's going to be way faster to clear these. You just need 1 gun, 1 door, done. You're on to the next section. They also nerfed the artificial brain activity, which was by far the easiest one, and I personally didn't think needed any changes other than the elites that were part of it in general, but they lowered the maximum amount required from 30 to 20, so now you only need 20, and they lowered the amount you can hold from 15 to 10. So it instead of it being you need less brains to clear it, but you also can hold less. You only need 2 runs of 10 instead of 2 runs of 15. So overall, it's going to be much, much faster. So you'll see this is footage from today's dungeon, the invasion here. You just need 10. You can clear these incredibly fast, and you'll see in a second that they ended up nerfing a lot of the bosses at the end of the invasions as well. So I think artificial brains is probably just going to be the easiest one to complete overall. You just need to fill up 10. And honestly, I got to the point where I just only went to the deposit when I had exactly 10 because I knew it needed exactly 20. So you hit 10, turn it in, hit 10, turn it in, and then you're done. They also adjusted the standing on arcade tiles puzzle mechanic as well. And this one, just like the previous tumor mechanic, they made this a lot more readable, but also a very important change for this one was making it not just color related, but also shape related. It's something that I think that you learn in the first couple years of game development, that there are a lot of people with a lot of different senses, color blindness, hearing imparities, vision imparities, all of these things, like being able to interact with interfaces. And so making it very color related, I think was a huge miss. And so now they're making it color and shape, which means that if these colors look similar to you, then you can use the shapes to distinguish them depending on what color blindness you have. But also in general, making the colors more distinct as well based on the different kinds of color blindness, because there are many. And so they just changed this up so it's easier for people of all kinds of visual acuity that they can actually see the difference between these. And they also reduced the number from 6 to 4 as well. So there's only 4 total. 3 of these will be required to open the gate inside of it, and there will be an extra one that's not needed. They also reduced the occupation time to 3 seconds, which is mega fast. You can blow through these rooms in a matter of like 9-10 seconds. You can be out of there. It's crazy fast. They got rid of the bomber that destroys the tiles. This was actually a bit of a way you could cheat too, because the bomber only ever went after the tiles that were correct. So if he ran towards one, you knew that was the right color. Not that you really needed to, but there was that as well. They also, the symbols will linger longer after you step off the platform in the sky, so you can still use it and look at them as you're coming down. And overall got rid of some of the duplicate tiles. And they also mentioned that they added additional platforms for some of the dungeons that may be a little too spread out, or it's like really far away from the gate to the tiles to the platform in the sky to find them as well. They also changed it so you can see the gate at all times, so that you don't actually have to be on the platform to see it. You can see what colors are required. These rooms are very easy now. You can just jump on, find the tiles, step on them. They take 3 seconds to finish. You're immediately on to the next one, and then you're done with the room. These ones are definitely, I think, close to the brains. Depending on your like spatial recognition and color recognition, this may be hard for some people, but in general, I think that these got significantly easier based on the version that they had before. Another big part, and possibly one of the most important parts of the nerfs that they did today, is they went through and adjusted all of the bosses at the end of these dungeons. I think there's still a couple that are problematic, but especially yesterday's Fortress dungeon highlighted one of the worst ones for me was Goroth. He's the one that shoots the hockey pucks and the freezing bombardments. They had this modifier on all of the invasion bosses where it would lower all of their cooldowns, so they would spam abilities more often to make it more challenging. But it also created this situation where there was never any time for some builds to even fight back because their abilities were being spammed so frequently. And I also I run sniper rifles a lot. Running against Goroth or some of the ones that shoot the hockey pucks that have actual hit detection on them, which means that if you have a sniper rifle and you're trying to snipe Goroth and he's surrounded by this airfield of anti-aircraft hockey pucks, it becomes very difficult to deal damage to him unless you have a spammy weapon or you're using a bunny. So I think a lot of that was a big part of the problem with the invasions as well. So they reduced the frequency of skill use during immunity, which is during their transition phase. Ledra, Sigvor, Goroth, Gramoth, all of these got reduced. And they also did some minor changes to some of them that really needed it individually as well. So for Sigvor, reduced the duration of AoE remaining after the explosions. So this was people were jumping in the pits and dying because of the remaining damage that was coming from it. They guided projectile skills from Vrignid and reduced the frequency of the barrier wall so you can actually have damage windows where you can actually deal damage to him, which is nice. They reduced the beam skill frequency on the Dreadful Abomination, they probably could reduce this even more. He was spamming it like non-stop back-to-back before, but I haven't fought him yet, so I'm not sure exactly how much this needs to be adjusted still. Tis Ruin will no longer do the guided projectile, which is a huge win. Gannett will no longer spam a monster summon constantly, so you need to have an AoE build in order to fight him. And they also made an adjustment to the drop amount in Invasion. So previously, last Saturday, they made an adjustment that increased the drop chance of the Haley materials from the normal infiltration operation dungeons. Now they have increased the drop amount from the invasion dungeons, which means that if you do an invasion dungeon and you get gold, you will get 5 pieces of the associated research material, which means you can finish Haley very quickly. I think this coming so late in the game, like a week later, is going to be kind of an interesting test case in like social experiment, because now what's going to happen is people on the old system are now getting to the point where they can finish and craft Haley because of the old system. The new system now drops a lot more, and everyone, if they're trying to farm effectively, will be doing invasions every day so that they can get their 5 million gold. So now we're getting to the point where at the end of, by October 10th, when we get this vendor, everyone's going to have a boatload of excess Haley materials because they're doing invasions and they don't need them anymore. So this is going to be, I don't know, I feel like this is a very weird situation they've put themselves in with this specific effect. Next, they took a look at the Inversion Reinforcement system. A lot of these buffs that were in here were just absolute trash. Like, they were just so unbelievably bad. I don't know how anyone could have thought that they would be good or people would be excited to use them. They were just so god-awful. They're like lowering your skill crit to give you a minor amount of electric resistance. It was overall just so rough. So what they've gone through is they've done a pass on all of these, checking all of them to make sure that they're useful. They either did a removal of the flat penalties. You can see, like, for example, with the first augmentation version, they took the defense minus from it and removed it. Sometimes they removed the penalty and also buffed it, and sometimes they kept the penalty but buffed it overall. So all of the buffs that are going into this are going to make a much bigger difference. So for example, you have close to 50% max HP on the first augmentation now. You have a crazy amount, like 30 plus on the max shield. The max MP now goes up to 20%, though you still have the minus skill range on it. So all of these went way up, and because they don't have the minus on them now as well, it means they're a lot easier to use. And also, a lot of these had like triggers that were really nice as well. So for example, augmentation is the first one here. If you get the permanent augmentation upgrade, if you have an augmentation active, you also get damage reduction, which is really nice. However, most people didn't want to have an augmentation upgraded or activated, is because you would get a plus and a massive minus. It's like, why would I reduce all of my defense down so that I can get a damage reduction incoming damage? Like, why would I sacrifice defense to get damage reduction when I can just not sacrifice defense in the first place? You can see even here, I haven't even spent points on these because they were so unbelievably bad. But having these being buffed and upgraded now means that it's much more viable to have these bonuses active, so you can get a single augmentation, activate it, get this passive active, and same thing goes for the composite if you really wanted to have that going as well. All of the resistance ones had their negative effect removed, and now they just have their resistance on it. Resistance isn't super crazy good in this game. In fact, I would much rather these buffs be a flat amount of resistance, because what's happening right now is most people are just building lots of HP with some amount of defense to survive. We're kind of forced to sometimes run flat resistance on our externals because there aren't other options for re-rolling those externals and getting like different stats on them based on the stat availability. But because of that, most people don't have a lot of resistance anyway. So having percentage-based resistance increases, I feel like, is a little bit misguided. I feel like if this was like, plus 3,000 fire resist stacking up to 2 times, like you could actually get a flat amount of fire resist, which means if you have no fire resist, you could activate this before Molten Fortress and get a flat amount of fire resist without having any, which is really nice. But the fact that these are percentages is just kind of silly. It doesn't really do too much based on how people are building right now. And again, if you have one of these active, you'll have the attribute resistance increased as well. They also improved some of these defensive options and healing options in here. Some of these had some really massive of negatives, like giving you movement speed, but also removing all like 30% of your firearm attack at the same time, which made it really rough. They did increase the value of selective neurostimulation, but I wish they just lowered the cooldown instead, because it's a random effect every minute. I would much rather this be like a random effect that's smaller, like every 10 seconds or every 20 seconds, just to make it a little bit more usable. But they did buff the value, so that gets a little bit higher, and generally just buffed all the ones in this row. Survivals also all got buffed, and the negatives got removed, I think, from every single one of them, which makes them a lot more interesting for a lot of these situations. And I think in general, because these are for specific legions, I hope people start using these for the invasion dungeons. Once we understand exactly what legion you're facing, you can actually get some nice damage reduction for 5 seconds every 15 seconds, which is going to help you a lot. There's also another one that you want to use now after they buffed it up. This one is when you're standing on an archive tile, that like the tiles that you need to find, like for example, the boss in the puzzle dungeons, you need to stand on them to shoot the boss. I think forced device connection is going to be great for that, because when you're standing on it, you get increased defense, which is really, really nice for surviving some of those scary bosses. But overall, they made everything better. And by the way, for all the Excava haters out there, they did buff the Excava seasonal buff now, which is now 51% of firearm attack. So the Excava is now even better than it was before, now that the seasonal buff has gone up as well. Overwhelming shield has been buffed, so Kyle mains can rejoice. Overwhelming HP has been buffed, though someone in my chat mentioned that this is still less than it was before for some of the Ajax mains, so there might still be some Ajax bugs out there. They decreased the defense and HP of Pyromaniac, both normal and hard. And this one is kind of odd to me, and it tells me that there was probably some fall off where players were, they probably have metrics on this, where players were playing up to a certain point and then quitting the game, and it's possible that most of those players were quitting at either normal or hard Pyromaniac, and so they probably nerfed it because of that. I don't think they nerfed it because the hardcore player base or even these, casual player base was struggling with it. I think that they were just losing players at this specific breakpoint, and so they wanted to make it easier, because obviously, if you know how to play against Pyromaniac, I don't think he's one of the more challenging bosses in the game, but it could have been a point where people were exiting and no longer playing at this point, so they wanted to make that a little bit less frustrating. They also reduced the HP and shield of the hummingbirds on the Executioner and Pyromaniac battles. This one is, I think, a much better change for new players, because I think new players don't know what the hummingbirds do. So if you're facing against Executioner or Pyromaniac, it's these drones that appear in the sky and start channeling beams onto Pyromaniac or Executioner. And I wouldn't be surprised if most of the player base don't know what these do at all. And all they do is they actually will channel Frenzy into the boss, which means that if you leave the hummingbirds alive, he's going to go to his immune state faster and more often because of the hummingbirds, and their HP value and shield value meant that you just needed a couple shots to hit him. Now you should just be able to spray and pray and burn them all down. But I would imagine that a lot of players actually don't know what these hummingbirds do and weren't countering them effectively, so making them easier to kill, I think, is a good thing. They also did the kill score for mobs in Magister Lab, Unknown Laboratory, and Quarantine Zone. With some of these dungeons, and there's a couple more that are like this as well, it wasn't possible to get max score to guarantee the double amorphous drop rate even at 250%, and even at the second mid-level, it was tough to get decent scores because there just wasn't enough monster score in the dungeon. So they increased the monster score for those dungeons, and I think hopefully we'll get a couple more dungeons modified this way in the future. They also shortened the time required to interact with objects. I'm guessing this means like all of the pedestals and platforms you have to interact with in dungeons, like going up and doing your hackermans on a keyboard to activate a platform, or go up and turn on a little like sentinel area, or activate the Kuiper mining stand and block places from that deploy. Hopefully that just gets shorted, because a lot of people were doing difficulty modes and just dying while doing their hackermans on the keyboard because it just took so long. Then we just have a bunch of bug fixes at the end here. So they adjusted some cleanups for Outposts, which is really nice. They also made, there was an error, like a text error in a few places, like the upgrade for the Excava had a wrong text on it as you were using it for unique upgrade. There was a bug with the text on Haley's passive that showed that the range would change, even though it doesn't, so they fixed that one up. They fixed one of Haley's bugs where you could slide on the ground awkwardly depending on when you use her 4 ability. I don't think they fixed the invisibility bug, but they have at least fixed the sliding bug. And they also cleaned up the bug slash feature that we had with Jayber. It was kind of hilarious to me that Jayber had been bugged for the longest time since launch. They did a big patch removing all of his bugs, and in the same patch introduced 2 new massive bugs for Jayber, except in this time, instead of making Jayber worse, the bugs made Jayber better, and those have been cleaned up. So now the turret engineering will no longer allow you to infinitely stack multiple turrets for infinite duration, so that like infinite turret bug is now gone in the game, and they also did it so that the skill range effect was not being applied improperly in some cases, so those 2 bugs are gone. And they generally just look forward to the October 10th upgrade with Ultimate Freyna, the Deathstalker boss, and the vendor that will allow us to sell and buy blueprints and excess materials, which is going to be really great. We're kind of speeding towards that. We're just about a month away from that, so hopefully this patch, this portion of the season is much better and better received for a lot of people as well. They improved the Haley drops. They're happy with the amount of people now running dungeons for XP. If you don't know, like Magister's Lab and Biolab are massive XP increases over the previous. I think we still have a major lack of good XP grinds for weapon proficiency, but the dungeons for character XP are much better, and I think much more preferred because you are getting rewards on top of XP at the same time. But let me know what you think about the hotfix down below.
If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.